Hey guys, welcome to another VAM tutorial, but this time it is a very special one. The talented coder Acidbubbles released an early beta version of this timeline plugin beginning of January 2020 on Discord. This plugin offers keyframe animation in VAM. VAM-Timeline is a true game changer when it comes to character or object animation inside VAM. I just had to create the dedicated tutorial for this plugin and introduce it to a wider audience. So enough of words, let's see where to get this tool. Besides the link in the video description pointing to the post in the official VAM channel on Discord, you can get the plugin directly from Acidbubbles' GitHub site. Just open the browser with Google and type Acidbubbles GitHub. Look for VAM-Timeline, then for the Releases tab and select the latest version. At time of recording, this is version 1.7.1 beta. Then select the zip file and save it to your VAM folder. I recommend to create a scripts download folder within the VAM folder. Rename the file with the right version number, as there is no README file included. This makes it easy to keep track on the installed version. Now navigate to the download folder and unpack the zip file. If it does not yet exist, create a new subfolder Acidbubbles under Custom Scripts. Copy all contents of the zip file to the Custom Scripts Acidbubbles folder. Installation done. Okay, after we have downloaded the plugin, we will now have a look how we can apply the plugin to the model. This is, by the way, the same model which was used for the pole dance animation in the intro, just with a different outfit for this gym. First I activate the edit mode and move the model to a more convenient position. Select any node on the model and then click Select Root to get access to all the settings tabs. And we choose the Plugins tab. As you can see, we have already one plugin loaded, which is my Breathing Deluxe script. But I have disabled the idle motion section to have just the breathing animation and some facial expressions active. Now we click on the Add Plugin button and browse to the Acidbubbles folder where we installed the Timeline plugin. We see now two .cslist files which will load several smaller scripts at once. The first one is the VAM-Timeline.AtomAnimation.cslist. The second file is the VAM-Timeline.controller.cslist. In order to animate the model, we need the AtomAnimation.cslist. Once the plugin was loaded, we can open its user interface. So let's check out what we have here. The first tab is called Animation Settings. Here we can set parameters for each animation which we create with this plugin. Examples are animation name, animation length and playback speed. In addition, it is possible to chain up several animations and blend them into each other. For this, the blend duration, which defines the time to move all active nodes from the current position to the positions at start of the next animation, can be set here. And another important setting is the loop toggle. If set, the animation is played automatically repeating, either endlessly or during a preset time. In this case, the plugin also ensures that the positions of the nodes close to the end are interpolated towards the positions at the first frame of the animation. But if you want to create an animation where the character just changes the position and pose from A to B, you should disable this toggle before you start with the animating process. At this field we can define which animation is played right after the currently selected animation. At this time there is no animation listed, as we did not yet create one. However, I will demonstrate this in detail later, no worries. With the slider Next Blend after X seconds, we can set how long the current animation should be repeated before the next animation, which is defined in the Next Animation field, is loaded. With a value of 0, a looping animation repeats endlessly. On the top right side we have the possibility to define controllers for the animation. Controllers are the nodes which are actively holding position and rotation in the model shown as green cubes. So in this case, the head, both hands, hip and both feet. However, as long no controllers are set active for record, the script does not detect any movement of them. So let's get started, select the head controller and click Add Controller. Now head is visible as the first controller in the list. Then we need also the hip controller. In general, for a full body character animation, we need to select at least head, hip, both hands and the feet. I will select all of them now. Okay, all nodes which the script shall monitor and record are now set to active. Monitoring means as soon as I move a node away from the current position, the plugin recognizes the change in position or rotation, and the frame which I am currently in the timeline will be automatically set as Keyframe. Good. Another very important setting which I have to do before I can start animating is to set the length of the animation. Means I need to think roughly about the question how many seconds the movement which I want to create will take. I will not try to make an animation of a knee bending exercise. I would say a time of 3 seconds for a complete knee bending cycle should be okay. And I will make it a looping animation. As you can see, I cannot yet change the animation length when I click on +1, because I first have to modify the Change Length mode from Length Locked to Crop Extend End. I use this as I want to add some length at the end of the animation. Note that the last frame is moved when doing this. So a keyframe existing at position 2 seconds will be moved to position 3 seconds. And finally, we give our first animation a name. This is very important when we want to create many animations. Let's call this one Knee Bends. It is visible in the drop-down fields as soon as we click on it. Okay, loop is active, we have 3-second animation length, name is there, now we are okay to head over to the tabs drop-down. Beside of the controllers tab, there are only those tabs listed where we have something defined on the right side of the animation settings tab. We have also the possibility to animate storyboards, which can be for instance geometry, which equals to morphs. But I will explain this more in detail later with an actual example. Right, the next tab which we now need to open is called Controllers. By the way, conveniently we can also change the tabs by use of the slider above the drop-down. The active animation is shown here. In case we have more animations, we can cycle through them here as well. An important item here is the scrubber slider, which can be used to navigate to any frame of the animation. However, the character is not yet moving as we have no additional keyframes defined yet. There is only the first keyframe with all active nodes ticked, and the position data in there is the current pose. And in the info field here, we can see which are the nodes affected by the current keyframe. Means when we scrub to a later position, which does not yet hold keyframe data, all the checkboxes are disabled. It is possible though to activate nodes manually, but the position which is then stored in this frame is the same as in frame 0. Going back to position 0 seconds. To get a bit of feeling for the animation flow and to get a constant animation, I recommend to start by adding keyframes with the time buttons below the scrubber. As I want to have my first keyframe at 0.5 seconds, I click 5 times on plus 0.1. Now the animation position is at 0.5 seconds, but we have not added keyframe data at this position yet. This happens automatically when we start to move node controllers to new positions. Let's try this. We want to create a simple knee bend animation now, so we move the arms to front for the first keyframe. I do not try to make a perfect animation now, just want to demonstrate the process. I need to change the UI visibility setting first. And disable Draw UI on top. For my workflow this is more convenient. Okay, now we can already see that the controller nodes which we have moved have been added to the list of affected nodes. That means that this frame at 0.5 seconds has now automatically been converted to a keyframe. We can now use the scrubber to play any interpolated frame between position 0 and 0.5. Means for each single intermediate frame between 0 and 0.5, the script interpolates the position and rotation of all active nodes between the position data stored in those two keyframes. And now that we have created a second keyframe, we can use the next frame and previous frame buttons to jump from keyframe to keyframe. We have to prepare the model a bit to allow a fluent knee bend. This requires that we have a slight angle on both knees, so I rotate the feet controller slightly. And I also adjust the hip and head orientations a little bit. There is one tip which I want to give you here. If we want to move or rotate certain nodes only in one axis, we can use the lock setting on the Move tab of that node. This can prevent that we move the node by accident not only down but also sideways. To use this function, select the respective node and click on the Move tab. We know that we only want to move in the vertical axis, which is the y-axis in Unity, so we set the x and z axis to locked. The rotation does not need to be locked, so that gives us a bit of freedom. We just want to prevent in this particular animation that we move the hip controller to left, right, front or back side. I'll do the same for the head. Okay, all unwanted moves are blocked for now. Going back to the timeline UI, and now we decide that the actual down movement of the knee bend shall take 1 second, so we click on +1. Now we need to position all relevant nodes to create the new pose. Alright, we finished our keyframe at 1.5 seconds. There is one thing worth to know. As we have specified this as a looping animation, the script now automatically interpolates the positions of all nodes to the pose which is stored in the first frame, even if we did not told this. This makes sense, as in a looping animation, the positions of all nodes in the first and last frame must be identical. We can directly see this effect when we use the scrubber to go to 3 seconds. Depending on the current pose and the starting pose, this transition can create quite strange effect without proper keyframes in between. So be not frightened if something strange happens. We can fix this easily by copying the current keyframe data to the position of the next planned keyframe. Click Copy Frame. Click +1 because the stand-up animation shall also last 1 second. Then click Paste Frame to insert the data here. Now we have exactly the same pose on the keyframes at 1.5 and 2.5 seconds. We can check this by use of the next frame and previous frame buttons. Okay, based on this pose, we modify the nodes to make the model stand up again. Good, practically we do not need to set another keyframe, because the next pose is already the starting pose. So the plugin interpolates the arm movements automatically. Yay! Time to watch our first simple animation completely. Clicking on play. Okay, there is still some room for improvement. The arms move a bit strange sideways, but luckily we can easily fix this, because we can edit our keyframes at any time. Let's have a look where the problem is. I try to correct the positions of the relevant keyframes now from a different perspective. Nice, this looks better now. Okay guys, this is important. Whenever we finish an animation and before we save the scene, set all animations back to position 0. Else some strange things may happen when loading the scene or switching between animations. The reason is that VAM saves not only the keyframes, but also the current pose and position of the character. In case the animation starts playing after load, the character jumps from this stored position to the first keyframe of the first played animation. Fine, our first animation knee bend is ready. Now let's add more and see how we can chain them up and trigger them from within the scene. To add the new animation, we click on Create Animation from Current Frame. This means the start position of the next animation will be exactly the same like the current one. Okay, now we have a new animation called Anim2, and with this one we will check out how to create non-looping animations. First we name this animation Stand to Lay. The next animation will be push-ups. I think for this animation, to move from standing pose to lying pose, 3 seconds should be sufficient as well. But before creating the keyframes for this animation, it is important not to forget to uncheck the loop toggle. Reason is that this animation shall not loop, but transfer pose 1 to pose 2 only one single time. The first step is to think about how exactly would a human go down to get into the push-up position. So maybe just try out how you do this by yourself in reality. Take a video if needed. I think the first step is to knee down, and we take 0.5 seconds for this first step. Generally, it will not give usable results if you try to move from one position into a totally new position with only 2 keyframes. To get a lifelike movement, you need to create intermediate keyframes. Okay, advancing by another 0.5 seconds. I think everybody knows now how to move controller nodes around, so from now on I will use fast forward while I'll do this. Otherwise this video would be too long and too boring. Adding a keyframe at 1.9 seconds. Adding a keyframe at 2.3 seconds. Adding final keyframe. Okay, a first test. Well, there is still a problem with the leg movement. We have to raise the back a bit to get some more clearance for the thigh. Jumping to the correct keyframe and lift the hip controller. Also activating all controllers for this frame manually. Good so far. Of course we could spend much more time to improve and fine-tune the movements, but this video is about to learn the workflow with the Timeline plugin. I spent quite some time with the pool dance animations, so watch this in the scene to see what is possible. Yes, that should do it for now. Next up is the push-up animation. So we switch back to the animation settings tab. The next animation should start from this pose, so again we click on Create Animation from Current Frame. The loop toggle was set automatically, which is fine. Then we rename Anim3 to Push-Ups. And now setting the length of the animation. I would say 1.5 seconds should be enough for the cycle. So we select Crop Extend End and click -1. Now that I think about it, 2 seconds should be better. 1 second for down, 1 second for up. Then we switch again to the controllers and start animating. Setting the first keyframe at 1 second. As this is a quite simple animation with almost the same pose all time, one single keyframe should do the job. The inverse kinematics in VAM does a great job. We mainly have to animate the head and hip nodes now. Also the hands could use a slight rotation. And that keyframe is already enough, as we set this animation to loop. So the script automatically interpolates back to the initial position. Let's see how this looks. Okay, that's not too bad. Ooh, it looks quite taxing for the girl. Good, the final animation which we have to do is standing up again. So once more we click on Create Animation from Current Frame. And name it Lay to Stand. The length will be 3 seconds, well, maybe even 4 seconds. Getting up is always harder, especially after 50 plus push-ups. And in this case we have to remove the hook from the loop toggle, as this is a non-looping animation from laying pose to standing pose. Back to the controllers tab and start animating. First keyframe at 0.5 seconds, and we move the back up and also lift up the foot a bit. Okay, you got the process now, so we will skip this part. That should be good enough for this purpose. And now we will learn how to chain up animations directly within the plugin. Starting with the first stand to lay that was made from the original neutral pose. But there is one thing to improve first. We have a slightly different pose at the end of our lay to stand animation than at the first frame of our stand to lay animation. So we copy the first keyframe of the stand to lay animation and paste it as the last frame of the lay to stand animation. Okay, now we can perfectly loop the animation chain that we will create now. We came a bit out of center as we did not lock the X-axis of the hip and head controllers. I'm kind of a monk here, so I will fix this quickly by adjusting the intermediate keyframes. But now finally to the animation chaining. stand to lay is the first animation, which has a length of 2.5 seconds. So we select as next animation push-ups. As we have a non-looping animation, we can set the next blend time to 0, so the next animation will play at the end of this one. Then we select the push-ups animation, which is looping, and set the next animation to play lay to stand. And here we define a longer period for the next blend timing. We have an animation length of 2 seconds, so we want to loop this 4 times and set the next blend timing to 8 seconds. Okay, done. Now we select the stand to lay, which is the first animation in our chain, head over to the controllers tab and click play. We should now see all 3 animations playing after each other. That looked not too bad. Let's have a look from a different position. Nice, so now let's explore what else we can animate with the plugin. For instance, we could add expressions to the push-up animation. Geometry is already selected, so we just have to find a fitting morph. Let's take one of the expression morphs. Oh dear, no, I also have to go down for exercises. What to take? Nah, it's a taxing exercise for the lady, so maybe pain is the right morph. Yep, that fits. We have to click on Animatable to use this morph. Then we jump back to the Timeline plugin and select Pain from the Animate parameter dropdown. Then click Add Parameter, and from now on all changes to the pain morph values are recorded in this animation. And now we also have a new tab called Params available. Here we can now update the facial morph values at particular keyframes. I guess pain should be active during the upward push sequence. We cannot see the changes, so maybe we should adjust the head position in order that the face is more visible. Okay, at the lowest point the pain is biggest. So I changed the morph slider to 1. Looks not really good. I would say we need to set intermediate keyframes to raise the pain morph level only when the lady is close to the floor. One at 0.4 seconds. And 1. at 1.7 seconds. Alright. So let's then have a look at the final animation chain. Alright, now that we have finalized our animations, let's see how to control and play them from within the scene, without using the Timeline plugin user interface. The first way to do this is to control the animation over triggers. We can use timeline triggers, animation pattern triggers, or even collision triggers. I will now add an animation pattern. Here it is. Now adding an animation step to be able to define an animation length. And I disable autoplay for now, as this is better during the setup phase, and I activate loop once. Now the timeline length is only 1 second, but we can extend this by setting a longer transition time on the animation step. Maybe 10 seconds is okay. Okay, the timeline has now 10 seconds. But I add one more step now and set this as well to 10 seconds. The total timeline length is now 20 seconds. That should be enough. To control the character animations from here, we have to select animation triggers and then add animation trigger. Then we give it a name. Now we have to set the actions for this trigger. The first step here is to select person as receiver atom. This of course can be another name if the character has been renamed. Then the receiver must be set to the VAM-Timeline.atom plugin. And the receiver target for the first action will be animation, because we have to select first which of the 4 previously created animations we want to play. For now, let's take the knee bends animation. I name this Select. Then the easiest way to make the next action is to duplicate the first action and rename it to Play. Now we just need to change the receiver target from animation to play or play if not playing. OK, and done. The knee bends is a looping animation, so if we trigger this now, it will start and loop endlessly. Means we also need to give a stop signal at some point. Selecting the animation pattern. Well, let's start the animation at 5 seconds. Then we duplicate that trigger. Set the name to stop. And finally we change the actions, removing the second one, and as receiver target we use stop if playing. OK. Now we also rename that action to stop. In complex scenes it is really vital to name all atoms, triggers and actions meaningful or you are lost at some point. Good, the knee bend animation has a length of 3 seconds and we want the girl to make this exercise 3 times. So on our timeline we set the stop trigger to 5 plus 9, which equals 14 seconds. Right, we select and start the animation at 5 seconds and we stop it again at 14 seconds. Let's test if this works as intended. Click play. Now the anime pattern has started, and at 5 seconds the character animation is triggered. 1, 2, 3 knee bends, and the animation stops. Easy, right? And as said, the same can be done with any other trigger type which is available in VAM. Then the next thing which I would like to show is the control panel which comes with the plugin. We go to Add Atom and then MISC. To use the panel we have to add a simple sine atom. This is the only atom type that currently can be used for this panel. Okay, here it is. We add now the plugin to this atom, but the one to choose is not the timeline.atom animation that was used on the character. It is the VAM-Timeline controller.cs list. And now we have already a user interface on the sign, but no animation available to select. The reason is that we first must open the custom UI and then we can link the controller UI to any atom in the scene that has the timeline plugin attached to it. Currently this is only the person atom, and we click the link button. Good, now we can see all the animations which are available for this character. And we can use the scrubber or the play button to play the selected animations. We can also jump from keyframe to keyframe in the controller interface. Okay, I will just delete the controller as we do not need it anymore. As if that was not enough, there is one more possibility to make the timeline plugin interact with the scene. It is by use of a linked animation pattern. To show this, I will add another animation pattern. And name this linked pattern. Then we add 2 animation steps. This is step 1 and this is step 2. Step 2 transition time shall be 3 seconds. Because it shall have the same length like our knee bend animation. To visualize what happens with this animation pattern, I will take this small sphere and link it to this pattern. Let's move the UI over here, go to the timeline plugin and select controllers. See what happens when I use the scrubber. The sphere is moving between the animation steps 1 and 2, just like I moved the scrubber slider. I turn the pattern now by 180 degrees to harmonize the direction. Okay, this means the plugin now fully controls the animation pattern, and this gives us the possibility to use all the trigger actions which are offered by the animation pattern and synchronize these to our animation. Let's try this. Adding an animation trigger at 1 second, and as action we select as receiver atom the light which simulates the sunshine. It is light directional. Receiver is light and the target is on. You have to know when we select on as target and have check to send true active, then the light will be switched on. But to switch the light off, we have to use the same target on, but we must remove the hook here, so the command on gets false, which equals to the command light off. So let's first switch the light off at 1 second. Then we duplicate that trigger and move it to 2 seconds. Name the first trigger to off and the second to on. And in the actions of the second trigger, set the name as well to on and set the hook for true again. Good, let's test. In theory, when I use the scrubber to play the animation, the light should be switched at 1 and 2 seconds. Yes, it works. That happens as well when using the play button, but currently the animation pattern does not reset properly when the plugin animation loops. It works well when scrubbing, but not when playing. I hope this little bug will be fixed in one of the next plugin releases. Finally, one new feature that was added lately in plugin version 1.7.1 is the toggle Auto Keyframe All Controllers. This is very helpful to create the raw animation. Because usually when we move a single controller node, only this one is recorded and set active for the keyframe. But this behavior has a big disadvantage. I'll try to explain this with a graph. The red dots show active keyframes and the curves show the movement of controller nodes in the x-axis. Now imagine that you move the hands around over several keyframes, say between position 0 and 2. When you then additionally start to move the feet beginning at 3 seconds, and thus create a keyframe for the feet at this time, the plugin will now interpolate and move the feet positions already starting from timeline position 0 on and not from 2 seconds on as expected. This happens because the last active keyframe for the feet is at 0 seconds and the next keyframe is at 3 seconds. So the feet move to the new position between 0 and 3 seconds. But when this toggle is set active, the plugin will record the positions of all controllers at every keyframe, even if we only move one of them. Means in our example, the feet will start moving at 2 seconds and reach the final position at 3 seconds. Okay guys, we reached the end of this tutorial and I want to send again a big thanks to Acidbubbles for making this plugin, and as well to all watchers who have been brave enough to watch the full video. If you like my tutorials and want to support me with $1 or $2, check out my Patreon page. The link is in the video description. Both scenes, the intro pool dance and as well the stream scene, are available for download on Patreon as a bonus for my backers. Keep it up and happy VAMming!